And let's welcome Professor Brighton Mvumi from the Agricultural University of Zimbambwe to talk about the maize value chain assessment of loss.
Maize is a very important crop in Zimbabwe and Southern Africa as a whole. Without maize, you are a very poor household because you don't have food. The other challenge that we have in Southern Africa is the unimodal rainfall system, which means that we can only produce maize in one season. Therefore, your grain storage is a critical food security strategy. Some studies, in fact, some estimates that have been done by the athletes showed that losses are between 15 and 17.5%. Maize is an area that required investigation in terms of post-harvest loss reduction. So the study objective was to obtain a clear understanding of the weak points in the maize supply chains, but at the same time try to identify interventions that would reduce food losses and improve efficiency of food supply chain. I must hasten to point out that what I'm going to be talking about here is preliminary because we haven't had enough work on it. We're supposed to have multiple visits to generate the data, but so far we've only had a single visit. The methodology is basically similar to my colleague. So there is the range of tools that were used. So my results are going to be based on household interviews, focus group discussions, key informant interviews, and also district stakeholder interviews. And then all this is, we hope that it will feed into a national stakeholder consultation process. We selected a number of districts based on the volumes that were being produced of maize. We also looked at the occurrence of the pest, larger grain borer, which is a big threat to maize, to food security. And we looked at a number of farming sectors, which constitute the smallholder sector, and we ended up with a total of 310 respondents at household level. And we also had these focus group discussions. 373 farmers were involved, district stakeholders, 59, and some key informants at the local level, the village level. And a total of 778 respondents were interviewed. But just to highlight the fact that we've got the levels here, ranging from the consumer to the producer, and all these green boxes are basically the producer's responsibility, where we're talking about the production, the harvesting, the sun drying, the manual shelling, and the on-farm storage. And from the on-farm storage, farmers have got the option of selling to traders in the form of agro-dealers, as well as to the central marketing board, which we call the grain marketing board, where they do the central storage and also central pest control. And from the agro-dealers, when they buy from the farmers, they are just a stepping stone. Next, they will actually sell to the grain marketing board, but they may also sell to rural households who don't have enough maize. But some of the maize go directly to these households. So there are many routes there. And then we do have informal traders. These are the municipal markets that you find in the urban centers who can also buy the grain from the agro dealers. And so eventually the maize get to the processors, and there are various possibilities. Probably of interest is the fact that we also have popcorn processing. There are some people who actually buy the maize to popcorn, and then they sell to wholesalers and many other players. And we then end up, obviously, with the consumers. So in terms of the survey, in terms of who is actually responsible for grain storage management, right, just to highlight the fact that women are mostly involved in grain storage management, with 54% of respondents saying that women are mainly responsible. And the family as a unit, constitute a very small percentage in terms of handling there. There was also a perception that most of the losses are actually happening in the field, either at harvesting or during the drying process. These are the perceptions coming from the different farmers. And in terms of moisture determination, they use rudimentary methods like biting or judging by the color of the kernels. And some farmers actually never check. And in terms of training, there's still quite a lot of work that needs to be done there, because more than 50% of the farmers, actually 54%, indicated that they've never been trained in post-harvest management or ever received any advice in that area. Most of the information was actually coming from the extension staff. So the Department of the Extension Services seems to be playing quite an important role. And then it was followed by the radio. So it means that many of these farmers, they owned radios somehow, and then the neighbors. In terms of marketing outlets, it was mainly the local traders, and this is mainly because the Grain Marketing Board wasn't buying any maize at the time of the visit. In fact, farmers were very reluctant to sell their maize to this central marketing because they hadn't been paid for the previous delivery, which had happened more than 12 months previously. And so most of the marketing, that's why it was happening at the village level and also at the local markets. Here what I'm trying to show you is that there were quite a range of prices, and basically I want to highlight the fact that prices doubled from the time of harvest to the lean period. So there is an opportunity for farmers to actually keep the grain. If they can store it and sell it during the lean period, they're likely to make more money there. At the private buyer level, there was quite a range of prices, $215 to $320 compared to the Central Marketing Board price of $390, which was rather artificial because they were they didn't have the money to pay the farmers, basically. So here I highlight some of the storage issues that came up. The young generation preferring bag storage as opposed to construction of new storage facilities. The lack of skill in constructing the granaries in the younger generation. And also in the younger generation, there was a kind of a lot of negotiation that could happen between couples. So there was shared responsibility in that case in terms of post-harvest activities. There was also widespread theft during storage, and this actually contributed to the change in choice of grain storage system, moving towards more indoor storage rather than outside. There was also no mechanism that was available which could transfer new technologies, especially in terms of the storage facilities, to the farmers. The process of application of pesticides was also noted to be a problematic area, posing serious health risks, and it was not being done properly. And there was a particular challenge with a pest called larger grain borer, which is Prostiphanes truncatus, which damages both the structure, the grain, and any other items that might be in the storage facility. So we also noted that the occurrence of the pest tends to be sporadic in nature, and it was literally translated to being a silent assassin, this pest, because sometimes you might think it's not there when it's actually there and doing a lot of damage, especially at the bottom of the stored grain. Traditional methods, yes, they were being used to a lesser extent, but farmers didn't have confidence in them because there were basically no recommendation packages. We also talked about the pesticide problems, which is now forcing farmers to actually use fumigants, which are actually not recommended for smallholder use, mainly because of the risks that are associated with that and the chance of resistance development. Varieties, yes, farmers used different varieties, early and late maturing, but at the end of the day, they bundled everything at the end of the harvesting season. So everything was mixed, which means the early varieties have been exposed to a longer period of pest infestation compared to the late varieties. The post-harvest structures, in terms of timber, there is depletion of natural resources, so people are moving away from there, but also there is fear of theft, as mentioned earlier on, and also the timber structures are also being threatened by the larger grain borer. In terms of marketing, maize is kind of the responsibility of men, and men mostly make decisions on how much to retain and what needs to be consumed at local level and what needs to be marketed. There was a lack of financial accountability by men when they sell this grain, and so it was an area of discussion between men and women. I've already mentioned the fact that the Grain Market Board had not yet paid for the grain. We also took some samples during our service just to establish the condition of the grain, and you realize that it occurred in different forms. We had shelled, dehulled, dehusked maize in different areas, but I just want to highlight that there was quite a lot of damage already. Sorry about that. No. Right. So you could get as much as 7% loss. So, damage, between 4 and 7% damage, which is already quite high, considering that this is the beginning of the storage season. So, action needs to actually be taken. And when you look at the insect numbers that were found, you could actually see that there were a lot of maize weevils which were alive in all the samples that we looked at, and also some of the samples already showed some live insects of the larger grain borer, which is quite notorious. These are the preliminary critical post-harvest loss points that we identified. The harvesting stage seems to be quite problematic, particularly with the late rains. We also have a lot of pests, rodents, wild animals, and also storage insects attacking together with termites. And then during the storage phase, you also have losses due to rodents, insects, but also due to inappropriate facilities. And there was general lack of knowledge in terms of the post-harvest management practices that are recommended. The drying, which generally happened on the ground, exposed the crop to various types of pests, and also especially when the weather was unfavorable. The current facilities that are there are also inappropriate. There was also a lot of spillage during threshing and mechanical damage, which exposed the grain to a lot of damage by pests later during storage. We are also supposed to do load checking, but this was problematic mainly because of the challenge with the grain marketing board, which is supposed to be moving most smallholder farmers in Zimbabwe actually sell to this grain marketing board. But because of the confusion, there's a standoff and not much grain marketing was actually happening. So there wasn't much movement of grain towards that direction. And we also gathered that other market players, they were also kind of waiting to to make farmers get frustrated so that they could sell to them at lower prices out of desperation. We are also supposed to do national stakeholder consultations, and these will be in the form of a national workshop. So those are the survey team from different institutions, government, and university staff. Also with gender being also covered there. Just to acknowledge those players who made this study possible, but also just to quickly take you through some of the practices that you find. This is supposed to be maize drying. You also have maize drying directly on the ground, but some people actually put something on the bottom. Those are some cribs that are being used. This is rotting that emanates from ground drying, and also late harvesting. That's shelling, hand shelling, and this is shelling again when people have large quantities of grain using beating using sticks. And these are some of the storage facilities that we came across. This is a community storage facility storing up to 30 tons. And these ones are typical smallholder structures, and you can see that there is some improvement from the traditional one. You may not be able to see, but this is the typical damage caused by the larger grain ball around neat holes showing some flour coming out. We also had a lot of flour there from the grain, and you could also see a lot of damage in back grain. These are some of the packaging materials, especially for fumigants. And these fumigants, farmers would walk in and purchase tablets, which they will be packaged into a very thin plastic, and they will carry home and then apply. And in most cases, they didn't have what we call, they didn't have airtight facilities. So that's quite a health risk. In one case, actually, we came across a case where 2 children had actually died because they had slept in the same room where the bags of maize, which were in polypropylene bags, had actually been fumigated. So otherwise, thank you very much for your attention.
Professor Mvumi, and we still need to do a quick panel discussion. So I'd like to invite all the speakers coming forward. And I'd like to save our time, I'd like to organize the panel discussion like this. First, I will invite Dr. Harriet Muyinda, our project leader in Uganda on food harvest and loss, to offering her insights and comments for these studies. And then I think we just have time for one question for each of the presenters. Okay. Okay.
Thank you very much. This morning we listened to 3 presentations, and as you realize, they were talking about food loss assessment. Now, FAO has initiated studies concerning food loss assessments in different countries in Africa. And this is mainly to identify the critical loss points at different food supply chains, and then to identify solutions of how we can reduce losses along these food supply chains. So that's why we've had presentations from GIZ, whereby we had the rapid tool of assessment, of loss assessment, which was presented here earlier this morning. And then we've had a presentation from Zimbabwe on tomato, and then another one from Zimbabwe on maize, and the maize food supply chain. The rationale behind this is that the FAO has realized that there is need to standardize the process of loss assessment, and it has come up with a methodology which has 4 stages, as you've seen in the presentation and in the 3 presentations. One of them is screening, whereby the different countries are supposed to screen and identify what is happening in that particular supply chain. And then another stage is survey, whereby the teams do surveys and carry out sampling along the different points in the food supply chain. And as you've seen from our presenters, they've been presenting how they tracked different loads of samples along the different supply chains. As you saw in tomato, the presenter talked about how they followed a track from one state to another to identify where the critical loss points happen. And then the 4th stage is solution finding, and this is supposed to be guided by how much loss is occurring in the different supply chain. Now, these loss assessments also fit into the Safe Food initiative, whereby all the information being generated is shared on the community of practice, which is one of the initiatives under FAO, and which is done in partnership with the Safe Food initiative. So when you go to the Safe Food website, you'll find a community of practice, which is being led by FAO. For me, I'm from Uganda, and we are doing a similar loss assessment study. It is under NARO, and this is under a study by FAO, World Food Programme, and IFAD. Our project is to identify the loss, mainstreaming loss reduction initiatives in especially 3 food supply chains, that is maize, sunflower, and beans. And we hope to come up with similar results as our colleagues have presented. So I'd like to open the floor for discussion of the presentations, and we need ideas of what you think about the solutions our colleagues have presented and how this can eventually result in food loss reduction. Thank you.
Let me summarize the presentations first. In Dr. Schuler's presentation, he presented the rapid loss appraisal tool developed by GIZ. It is not supposed to be a quantifying or measuring tool. It's just for pre-screening and to find the critical loss points and to support training. And you also integrate the aflatoxin to integrate a very fast risk assessment on aflatoxin. On the horticulture supply chain in Zimbabwe, the focus crop are tomato, leafy vegetables, and banana. And the critical loss points are identified, and at each step, the percentage of losses and the causes are also identified and measured, and the solutions are suggested. And those solutions are also prioritized based on their feasibility and cost benefits. In the maize supply chain study in Zimbabwe, the major methods employed were desk study, household interviews, and field survey, and national stakeholder surveys, etc. A chain map was produced, and the questionnaire items were briefly introduced. And the major issues in storage, marketing, and critical loss points are identified, and some suggestions were proposed. Thank you very much. And now, who has questions for our speakers?
Thank you very much. I would like to thank the panelists. All the presentations were very interesting. My comment or other question actually will extend to you, but also to the previous panel goes with solutions finding. Because as we talk of solutions, I think we need something that is sustainable. Interventions we know that interventions sometimes by donors or other organizations have got a lifetime. But I think if we address, especially institutions, strengthening of institutions that deal with the various solutions, various interventions, then maybe we can gain higher mileage. I would especially be interested to hear what is being done in the various areas as far as farmer organizations are concerned. Because weak farm organizations sometimes are the reasons for these food losses, because brokers, for instance, are dealing with individuals rather than strong farmer associations that can actually bargain for better terms. Thank you.
Thank you for that observation. I wouldn't agree with you more because I think for those solutions to work, there needs to be a driver. And in my view, a strong institutional framework is a vital catalyst. I think for those solutions to work, there needs to be a driver. And in my view, a strong institutional framework is a vital catalyst for the implementation of most of those interventions. But what didn't come out clear maybe when I did present my solutions was the fact that when we carried out our cost-benefit analysis, we were also looking at institutional capacity building. And I must stress that as far as the tomato supply chain is concerned, there was a provision in the solutions of strengthening farmers and encouraging them to set up an effective marketing association. We are advocating a single marketing scenario because the traders are taking advantage of their fragmentation. They are playing them one against the other on prices. The service providers like transporters are also doing the same. And I honestly believe that if there is more cohesion, there's more teamwork on the part of the farmers, a lot of their problems will be overcome through improved advocacy. The supply chain has got the capacity to absorb that additional cost without having to go outside.
Any other questions to Dr. Schuler or Professor Mvumi?
Hello, thank you all for your presentations. My question can be answered by anybody on the panel, and I don't know whether this is a concern for you, but I felt that it was missing in the presentations. Because of the damages you highlighted throughout the various stages, I'm wondering whether you're collecting any information of losses at the consumption stage by the consumers. So by the time they get the banana, they probably have 1 or 2 days to eat it. So I'm just wondering whether that's a concern for you, or are you just concerned with that end of the value chain?
Thank you very much. In our ranking of challenges, you find that the consumption end was not featuring as a major area of concern in terms of priorities. So in terms of entry points, we are looking at the most critical stages at this point, but it's not to say that it is not important. So maybe as we continue with the studies, we also need to shed some light on what is happening at consumer level and what are the consequences. But as of now, our entry points of intervention, they are mainly based on the priorities as generated by the respondents that we consulted, as well as the literature review that we also did. Thank you.
Yeah, let me add a comment. as the representative of FAO in Kenya this morning explained, it should be not a big problem here because the products are consumed to a very high extent. This part of the value chain we call waste, not food losses, we consider as waste, and this is a problem in my country, in Germany. And really we do a lot of efforts to reduce waste in the industrialized countries. And so far we know that it is not the big problem in your countries, in African countries. And for GIZ, we are concentrating therefore on the food losses, that means the steps in the value chains just before it comes to the consumers. And there we found a lot, all the speakers, I think, a lot of work to do, a lot of potential for improvements. So we did not consider the consumer level.
So brother Oldman from Zimbabwe, he talked about veg leaf. One of the techniques that can be used to reduce waste and loss in veggie is application of a boiling technique. Did you find anything about that one? Because in other parts of the African continent we used to do it, and we think it's quite useful. So how about in Zimbabwe? I would like to hear from you. A boiling technique. That we just boil water to a certain temperature, and then we toast the veggie. All right, and then we dry them. At the end of the day, they are not full cooked, but when we dry it, it becomes something, it has retained its some original shape, and it can be used. And when we want to use it, we make a sauce and then we toast it. That's what we call boiling.
No, many thanks for that clarification. I think it was a question of maybe semantics. That technique is already being used in Zim as well. And I must emphasize that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of researching on the efficiency and effectiveness of our drying systems. Because a lot of the farmers are relying on sun drying. And as you know, it's not advisable to, after boiling the veggies, to throw them out into the sun and then dry them without with the sun hitting them directly. And that education is being carried out in rural areas to try and discourage our rural farmers from practicing that, because that used to be the norm. And there are health hazards, risks associated with that practice. Now we're talking of drying, improvising, solar drying dryers, with plastic covers, and that's what we're researching on, and we're encouraging, more and more attention to going in that direction as a strategy to reduce waste at village level. In fact, some of the farmers have gone to a stage where they're now producing veggies in significant volumes and selling them in dried form in retail markets. And even if you go into Zim now, some multiples in supermarkets, you find these veggies on supermarket shelves, labeled, and it's another potential business that's just taking off. Thank you.
I just wanted to add to my colleague's contribution. The practice, as mentioned by the previous speaker, of dipping the vegetables in hot water, you find that at a rural level, the way it's being done is not up to standard actually, because that's when you lose a lot of nutrients, you also cause a lot of discoloration of the produce, and the demand for such products is very low. In fact, you would actually also need at a different level to educate people about consumption of dried produce. And what we've seen in Zimbabwe is that consumers, they tend to prefer fresh vegetables as much as possible. These dried vegetables, they are usually for deficit areas where production of vegetables in the conventional sense is very difficult, probably because of water shortages. Otherwise, if there's a choice of dried and fresh, if you walk into a supermarket, I mean, most people would actually go for the fresh produce. Thank you.
And, I think we are going to close the session here. Thanks to all the presenters, commenters, and question readers. Stephanie, you want to... Thank you.
So that concludes the morning's program. Thank you once again to all the speakers and the moderator. It's now 5 to 1, so I would like to invite you to reconvene at 1:45 after your lunch so that we don't lose too much time. And then we have 2 more sessions this afternoon. Thank you for your attention.